Creating users and groups is typically one of the first steps to building up a Spider Impact environment. I typically start with groups. To add a group, I'll select Administration in the bottom left, and then Groups and Permissions. I can see all the groups that have been added to my environment. Although not required, I've decided to create one group for each of the group types: Power Users, Update Users, Interactive Users, and View Only. I'll select the Power Users group and see that the group type, not surprisingly, has been set to Power Users. Because that was set, when I click on Advanced, I see the maximum list of permissions allowed. For power users, there are a large number of permissions that can either all be selected, all be unselected, or just a percentage allowed. If this was a group that contained all admin users, these permissions would be what I'd recommend, with all permissions allowed. However, if this was a group that contained users that were not administrators, I would need to be a bit more selective. The first selection I'd likely remove is the super admin rights in the bottom right. And you can deselect the top check there. I would also take the time to think through each of these other options more carefully. One that I'll highlight is an important option in the top left: View All Organizations. If this permission is granted, I'll have access to all the orgs in the environment. If it's not granted, I need to be granted access to each organization manually. I'll provide an example of that in a minute. For now, I'll restore all the permissions for this group by selecting Cancel in the bottom left and move on to Organization. Notice that the Selected Orgs section is blank. Even though it's blank, I have access to all the orgs in my environment. I'll just demonstrate that quickly by selecting another tab and selecting the drop down up at the top. I can see the Mobile World and Demos orgs. Going back to the other tab, I'll select Cancel. I'll move on to the Update Users group and see that the group type was set to Update Users. Because that was set, when I click on Advanced, I'll see the maximum list of permissions allowed for this group is less than half of those for Power Users. Notice that for this group, the View All Organizations permissions was unchecked. If I cancel and select Organization, I'll see that I needed to apply the orgs that I wanted this group to see. In this case, Mobile World and Demos. I'll select Cancel and move on to the Interactive Users group. Once again, I see that the group type was set to Interactive Users. Because that was set, when I click on Advanced, I'll see the maximum list of permissions allowed for this group is only a handful. Notice that for this group, the View All Organizations permission was checked, because it contains members of our executive team who have access to all orgs. I'll select the View Only group, see that the group type was set to View Only. Because that was set, when I click on Advanced, I'll see the maximum list of permissions allowed for this group is only 2. Notice that for this group, the View All Orgs permission was unchecked. If I cancel and select Organization, I'll see that I needed to apply the org that I wanted this group to see. In this case, just the root level of Mobile World. If I wanted to add cascading permissions, I would need to check the box next to the 20, which is the total number of orgs within Mobile World. If I wanted to add access to just a specific department, I would need to expand Mobile World on the left, select the department like Financial, click Add. I would then select Done and Save, but in this case I'll just select Cancel. The next thing I'd like to show is how to add a group. To do that, I'll click the plus or add button in the top middle. I'll give it a name like Training. Select the group type. I'll pick Interactive Users. And then select Advanced and confirm the appropriate permissions. I'm going to leave View All Orgs checked. And with that checked, I won't need to make any changes within Organization. I'll just select Cancel. Next, I can add a member to this group. I'll select D, And my last step would be to click Save in the bottom right. But in this case, I'll just select Cancel. I can also copy a group. To copy a group, I would click on the desired group like View Only, and then select Copy at the bottom. I then have the ability to rename the group and select those things I want to include with the copy. I'll choose to include the group members, admins, org permissions, and dataset permissions. I'll make note of the fact that advanced permissions will be copied automatically, and then I'll select Copy and Edit. The original group members and admins have carried over since I chose to include them. If I select Organization, Mobile World has carried over since I chose to copy org permissions. If I click Cancel in Advanced, the one thing that carries over automatically as per the note earlier are the permissions shown here. However, I do have the ability to manually change them. I would then click Done and Save, but in this case I'll just select Cancel. To delete a group, I need to click on the desired group, and I'll stay with View Only Copy. I would then click Delete at the bottom, and then confirm the deletion. One more item I like to show with groups is the ability to edit them by organization. Up at the top, I'll select By Organization. I can then select any element of the org hierarchy like Mobile World. In the top right, I can see which groups were granted direct permissions to it, update users in View Only, and notice that the power users and interactive groups are not listed. However, if I select Can View All Organizations, I'll see those two groups. Even though I didn't manually take the time to grant those groups access to the org, they automatically have access to it due to the View All Orgs permission. Lastly, for cascading permission, there are no groups shown, meaning that no permissions cascade down from a higher level. However, if I select Financial, I'll see one group with cascading permission, meaning that permissions were granted at a parent level, like Mobile World, and cascaded down to this level. Within this section, I see once again that power users and interactive users groups are not listed, but have access to the org due to the View All Orgs permission. The last item to note is that group permissions are also editable from this option. If I select Mobile World and expand Direct Permission, I can change whether permissions cascade. I can also edit a group. Next to View Only here, I could click Delete to remove access to the group from this org. I would then select Delete. In this case, I'll just select Cancel. With that, I'll move on to Users by selecting Users under Users and Groups. From here, I see all the users that have been added to my environment: Dee, Don, Frank, and Tom. If I click on a user like Frank, I can see which groups that person has been granted access to, and whether or not they're the admin of any groups. To add a user, I have two options. To add them manually, I need to click the plus icon. I would then enter a username, email address, first and last name, a password, and confirm the password. If I want to force the user to change their password the first time that they log in, I can leave this box checked. I can also add them to groups at this time, but for now I'll move on to importing users. I'll select the import icon at the top middle here and get presented with a list of instructions that I should follow very carefully, especially if I'm including existing users. To show how this works, I'll select Download Example. I'll then open the user's example file, increase the zoom, and expand all columns. Next, I'll delete the last two rows. Then start editing the remaining row here. The username, first name, last name, email, and password columns are all required. I'll edit this for the person I want to add. And I will type in Jason M for the username, type Jason as the first name, M as the last name, give a fictitious email address. I'll leave the default password there as well. The middle name column is not required, so I'll leave that blank. The group key column is also not required, but allows me to import a user to an existing group. For example, if I go back to Spider Impact and I'll select my second browser tab, I'll go to Administration and select Groups and select Power Users. In the top right, I can see the ID for the group, in this case 2006. If I go back to Excel, and if I wanted to import Jason automatically to the Power Users group, I would type 2006 for the group key. The title column is also not required. Furthermore, it should only be used if titles have been configured in the system. If I go back to Spider Impact, select the Application Administration, and scroll down to the bottom, the User Title section, I see valid entries in my system would be Mr. or Ms. I would need to type one of those two in directly into this field here, but for now I'll just leave that blank. With that, I'll click Save, and then I'll go back to my first tab within Spider Impact. I'll select the file that I was just working with, select Open, confirm the import looks as expected, and select Import. Confirm that was successful and click Done. Now if I select Jason, I'll see all of his credentials have carried over from the import, including the Power Users group. Note that if I included an existing user like Tom in the import and set a password, he would be required to log in with that password and be asked to change it. If I left the password blank, he would be able to keep his existing one and not be prompted to change it. Note also that as my list of users grow beyond a certain limit, this list will disappear and be replaced with a display that shows how many users are in the system and advising me to search or filter to find a user. In the Find box, I could just type a user's name like Frank to limit the list. To get more granular, I could select the filter icon and search for a portion of the name like the last name. However, I'll just clear out the entry to restore the full list. The next thing I'd like to show is the ability of an administrator to log in as another user to troubleshoot permissions, set up bookmarks, etc. To be able to do that, a user requires a certain permission. To show where that is, I'll go to Groups, select Power Users, and then select Advanced. On the right, under Administration, is an option called Login as Other Users. With that shown, I'll now select Cancel. Since Frank and Jason are part of that group, they both have the Login As option available to them. Thankfully, I'm logged in as Frank, so I'll go back to Users and select Jason. In the top right, I'll select the Login As option. I get prompted with a warning that everything I do will be recorded as myself, but I'll be editing things like bookmarks and alerts for Jason. Since I'm okay with that, I'll select Login. In the top left, notice a clear warning that I'm now logged in as Jason. See, this user has no alerts, no responsibilities, since I just added him to the system during the import. I could set bookmarks and alerts for him, but I'll leave that alone for now. I'll select Scorecards. Select the Demos org, expand Examples, and select Login as another user. I'll select Training Revenue and select Edit. I'll now illustrate that changes that I make logged in as Jason still get tied to Frank. I'll change the data type from number to currency, select Save, and click Done. If I then select the history icon in the top right and select all events, notice how the data type change shows as Frank making the change instead of Jason. With that looking as expected, I'll select Close and then log out as Jason in the top right.